Akhidele Rinpoche, Tudan Gompe, Tamzang。
目前是欧洲的朱棒车林仁波切跟噶千仁波切他们互相在问候。
Honorable said he already had breakfast.
他已经吃过早餐了。
那做共同餐 evening dinner。
They already had dinner.
他们在欧洲吃过晚餐了。妍芬，请讲。
今天那个德国中心的主本车林仁波切，他会给大家一个口传，就是昨天灌顶的咕噜咕噜的口传，因为很多人都觉得念咒啊这一些修法需要口传，所以昨天我就请他今天给大家口传，所以大家今天口传的时候注意听了啊，谢谢。
尊敬求当尊敬求南法将就巴人等待的教僧切太根将所见表错难解若来本色的三见正波的修
诸佛正法圣众会，直至菩提我归依。我以布施诸功德，为利有情，愿成佛。诸佛正法圣众会，直至菩提我归依。我以布施诸功德，为利有情，愿成佛。
Until awakening, I take refuge in the Buddha, Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merit of generosity and other good deeds, may I attain Buddhahood.
诸佛正法圣众会，直至菩提我归依。我以布施诸功德，为利有情，愿成佛。四无量心，愿一切众生具乐极乐因，愿一切众生离苦即苦因，愿众生不离无苦之标乐，愿永离爱憎，常住平等舍。愿一切众生具乐极乐因，愿一切众生离苦即苦因，愿众生不离无苦之妙乐，愿永离爱憎，常住平等舍。
Free from attachment and aversion.
香水出世，花朵铺满地，圣山四周，日月为庄严。缘念佛刹，以作供养故，愿诸众生受用清净土。景象三身圆满上师众，外内密山真如以供养。无生之财万物悉受矣，无上殊胜成就其次语。Om Guru Dewa Dakini Ratna Manjara Paticca Soha.
苍草瓦丹却见相旁谈，一色也然格的经所瓦也。耶瓦众生当给就三帕，他们见从表三就成后，sem见南就
应转法轮，一切众生之施会，根器不同而见之，共与不共，大小乘，其请因情转法轮。
Rinpoche la kokamsam. Welcome everybody. We have a
仁波切您
small
好
announcement.
非常欢迎大家来参加这一次的法会。
And at the beginning of the break, Drupal Rinpoche will give Gurukula long.
我们今天中午会休息一小段时间，大概在10点半左右。那么在一开始休息的时候，仁波切休息的时候，主办车灵会给予各位古力古列做明佛母的口传。
And friends, today I'm going to give some instructions on the bardo. And so it generally it is said that there are 6 bardos. And so together with the teachings, the instructions, there is also root text that we can recite. And so if that goes along with the teaching, then it many people have it. So this is what I'm going to introduce you to. And actually there are many teachings on that, and I also myself have given teachings on this particular root text before. But it's good to have this kind of as an ongoing prayer, like a daily prayer that you continuously read even after the teachings, because when these teachings are in your mind, these words are in your mind, then later when you're in the bardo after you've died, the bardo consciousness possesses clairvoyant abilities. It is said that there is 5 different kinds of kind of supernatural powers that the consciousness has in the bardo. And so due to this brightness of consciousness in the bardo, all the words of Dharma that you have heard in your lifetime will become very clear at that time. Even while you're alive, you might not have understood the meaning of it, even if you don't understand it now in the bardo, because the consciousness is so bright, you will understand the actual meaning of these words will arise within the consciousness. That's also why it's important to recite these prayers, this particular prayer too, on an ongoing basis as a practice.
这当把豆子了，看起来的，还会要的有的可以的。
诸位法友们，今天我们会给予中英教授。那么我们今天会讲6中阴的根本颂。那除了这我们今天所讲的法之外呢，也有这个根本颂，大家未来可以持续天天的念诵。因为这样子做有什么好处呢？因为在未来，在我们在中阴阶段的时候，我们会有神通的能力。那在生时，即使我们在听闻法教的时候没有办法理解的，在中阴的阶段，因为我们的心事都非常的清明，自然能够了解。这就是为什么持续来持诵这些根本颂啊，这些法本修法等等这个重要性。那么，这个读诵这些祈愿文的重要性就在这里。
这大你自己做吧，他从了，这里的了，每个月来，我起码没把他给到马到我他给他趁着了行，我都起码了行的，他们这里，这里他把到那把抽起的，这两个的抽个这个嘛的，这里，把到查证长没把有嘞，刚才说那的了，这我都起码他大的这里东西看差啊，我是去使用有嘞。大多嘛都七八十要过去了，我这里在到两年这边用电的，那得到了两年去送餐啊，这里在了应该这里现在到什么把都是这个，这有么成本扩大着我这里，比如说8家中有8家人扩大着我的，扩不成变他们这里。刚才的那么的这里是，你觉得我这里，大家你这俺这个这个这里8的家呢，这8家啥有啥人没有的，大多数大家你有嘛的，这里8家和啥有就有嘛的，你没说这里好了就别这个，这么来说嘛那就别的如果穷人就这样，今年是大多数刚才多嘛都七八的了。大多了的我来说，最早的哈过了，这里把就搞出的声音呢，大嘛多他就点着一下来，别的这里大，当然就不容易就是嘛的，可是他沟通的他我来，这里小开来，他的对嘛就是哪玩就是都点着我的，就可能就有嘛在这里，那个吃不完的这里你自己去把的。你妈个大娃子早就看到了是呢，到底你把那些当起毛的这都听我不能起码是呢，这里这都错那把那都弄个有的，这最早啊的哈可能这里还当批发进步有的。
So about Bardo, there are some things that are very important to understand, and these were also explained by mind. His words are in your mind, and later is so bright. So about then Bardo, there are some things that such a person who has realized the view, this life, future lives, and the Bardo all become the same. It becomes the same because such a person has seen that this life is illusory. And if you see this life as illusory, then all these thoughts of attachment and aversion will become liberated into their natural place. So when all dualistic grasping collapses, you will see everything as an illusion. And if you see everything as an illusion now, then also in the Bardo, you will be able to see the Bardo as an illusion. So then there is two different ways of seeing things in an illusory way. Chitsumila Ripa had said a person who has realized the view, to such a person who has realized the view, the 10 virtuous actions will naturally arise, and the 10 non-virtuous actions will be purified or will settle into themselves on their own. So those individuals, there is nothing that is impure any longer. Only purity arises. And that is because they have purified all dualistic thoughts, all dualistic clinging. And when there is no dualistic thought in the mind, then naturally the 10 non-virtuous actions and all the grasping, the fixation on things to be real, all of that becomes purified. Everything becomes purified into emptiness. And also, ultimately, karma, cause and effect is emptiness. So, on the other hand, those who have not realized the view, to them this life appears to be real. They cling to the true existence of various appearances. And to those individuals experience 6 bardos or intermediate states. And actually, it's even more than that. And so the various different states appear, actually limitless intermediate transitional states appear to such a person, and it's very individual. So if we do not purify the grasping at the concrete existence of appearances now in this life, then later on in the Bardo, the realize the view. And so if you recognize that, you will think that actually it is important to engage in practice. And if you really know how to practice, then just naturally this life, the Bardo and future lives all become one. So the mind is like a camera where you store all the pictures, all the films. And then the film that has been taken is comes from the fixation of not thinking there's a me, a self. And this is where all the difficulties in samsara for sentient beings arise from. It is because there is this ongoing thought of me, and therefore there is a grasping to a duality of self and other. So it is this self-grasping, grasping at the meme that keeps taking pictures or kind of recording, and then that is stored within the camera, which is the mind, and then as long as it is there, then the various projections, the film will become projected. So for someone who has realized that there is no self and other, there is then nothing to be projected. There's no film there. And therefore samsaric appearances cannot manifest to such a person. So that is why Milarepa had said that to such a person, the 10 virtuous actions arise on their own, and the 10 non-virtuous actions are purified into the natural state. So the difference lies in having or not having realized the view. And so this is how it is when someone has realized the view. So if you understand how to listen to these instructions on the Bardo, and then you know that also this is how then somebody must be, somebody who has not realized the view must be. And so, for example, also as our perception is so different, and that shows the view actually. For example, just before, Ruben Rinpoche had said that we just had dinner, and I said here we had breakfast. So then this is our perception. So over there it's evening, and here it's in the morning time. But it is said that actually time never changes. It's our perception of time that changes, our perception changes. But there is no real change or difference in time actually. It's just that people look at the sun and the moon and the movements of sun and moon, and then based on that, they kind of fabricate this concept of time and say that this is now here it's morning and here it's in the evening. And that is something people hold to be true. This is how it is. And due to the grasping at the true existence of people's ideas, then as a result they experience all kinds of feelings of happiness and suffering and so on. So in any case, if one simply understands the view, the benefits are so great.
그래서 다 발도 넘바 족이나요. 그 발도 넘바 족이 지마 지더니
首先，因为今天山上的网络不稳，所以可能各位看到的画面或声音会断断续续的，很抱歉。因为今天是教授的缘故，所以不像昨天就是在灌顶的时候会同步翻译，今天会等英文翻译讲完之后再来做翻译。那我们刚刚讲到说有关中阴，那有一些地方我们必须要了解。那当我们证到见地的时候，我们要了解到，不管是此生、中阴或者来生，都是等同的。因为如果我们有真正的见地的话，那么此生我们见此生如幻，一切的执着烦恼都觉得不再是这样子的这个值的。那么弥勒日巴祖师过去也讲过，等正得见地的人，十善自然升起，十不善自然得以净化。为什么说没有不净呢？因为一切都得到净化，只剩的善行了，一切不善都得到净化。因为我们执一切的执着，执一切为实的部分得到净化，那么完全转成了空性。在这种情况之下，就近而言，没有业也没有因果了。但是对于绝大多数的人还没有证得空性的，现一切为实。我们在中阴的阶段会有在轮回的阶段会有六中阴，或者是在中阴有更多的阶段，无数的中阴阶段，这些都是因人而异的。那么这不管是此生或者是来世，我们应该了解修法的重要。
We will come at the end is called the bardo of becoming, and the bardo of becoming is when we are in the bardo and we are about to take birth again. So this is the time where the consciousness has left behind the previous body and has not yet taken on a new body. So the consciousness without a body follows the karmic winds. And then depending on what karma one has accumulated, one will take birth. So if one has accumulated virtuous karma, then one may take birth in the most unique, special birth of the 6 realms of samsara. Only if one has practiced a great deal of merit can one take birth as a precious human being. And so then the consciousness enters the womb of the mother and takes birth as a human being as a result of virtuous actions accumulated in the past. And so then the moment one has entered the womb until one dies again, and this entire period is called the bardo of living. And so when does actually this bardo really begin? This one actually begins in the bardo of becoming. So you're still basically in the bardo, you're not yet a human being. So this is really where the bardo of living begins. Basically it begins the moment you enter the womb of the mother, once you have become a human being and take birth. Or you take birth anywhere in the 6 realms of samsara, depending on your karma. The 6 afflictive emotions are the karmic winds that will kind of propel us into any of the 6 realms of samsara, where we then take birth. And we take birth as a human being as a result of having practiced ethical discipline. It is said that someone who takes, for example, the Nyungne or the Nyingne vows, those 8 Sojong vows, a single time, every time you take them, you have the cause for birth as a human being, as a god or a human being. So this is explained in the benefits of the Nyingne practice. And the Buddha gave this as a method for samsaric sentient beings who do not always have an opportunity to engage in practice, because ordinary people are, for the most part, are distracted by ordinary samsaric activities. And so for them, there is the practice of the Nyingne and the Nyungne, and it is said that if you keep those Sojong vows, then even as a samsaric ordinary sentient being, then each time they keep those vows, they create a cause for birth as a precious human being. And so just recently, we did this practice here. And so when you practice virtue in this way, therefore you take birth, for example, as a human being. And so again, the moment you enter the womb of the mother until you die, this entire life is what is referred to as the bardo of living.
그랬더라. 제마다 제네바도 찾는데
那么，我们了解到此生中阴跟来生是如梦是幻的道理，我们更要了解修法的重要。如果说我们真能够这样子做的话，终究我们能够见到了悟到此生来世中阴无二无别的道理。这个就举一个我们世俗上的例子，就好像我们的摄影机跟投影机一样，跟底片。因为众生的我执跟执我有我，那所以这就是我们在轮回中受生的这个起源。因为我们有我的这种概念，而有自他二元对立，而把这些这个印记在记录在这个胶片上，那透过我们的心识，也就是摄影机、投影机，然后把它投射出来。那如果说我们今天没有自他二元对立的这种念头或者这种执着的话，那我们就可以说是没有什么影片可以投射了。所以以此之故，弥勒日巴祖师讲说，这样子见到空性这个见地的人呢，十善业自然的升起，十不善业自然消融的。那么有见地的人呢，自然会有这样子的一个境界。这个就是像刚刚我们一开始的时候，竹本彻林他讲说，他们吃过晚餐的，而我讲说我们吃过的早餐。那时间我们要知道是不变的，只是我们的感受、我们的觉受会所改变。人们往往因为外在的现象而有不同的经验，比如说我们人们因着太阳跟月亮而造出了日月的差别，以为这些就是实际的情况。但是因为我们执着一切为实而有这样子的痛苦，时间本身是没有变化的，可是因为我们在不同的地方有不同的感受而认为说我们是早上或者是晚上吃的早餐或吃的晚餐这样的差别。如果我们了知这种见地的话，对我们自己自然有大利益。 一般来讲，我们中阴有6种阶段，我们在讲受生中阴。那么这个是在最后一个阶段，在中阴的阶段即将要受生的时候，这是当我们的意识已经离开了那个我们的肉体，可是还未投胎之时，在这个阶段我们就依业风而飘，那依本世所累积的业而受生。最强的业会决定我们要投身到什么地方去。那么如果说我们再生行善的话，自然就可以获得人身或者天人的这个可能性。我们的意识进入到母胎之后而投身这个人生的开始，这就是因为我们过去世的善业。那我们这个到底是什么时候开始的呢？这一世就是从我们进入母胎一直到死亡为止，就是此生的中阴这个阶段。当一般人那这个我们一般人有6种烦恼，然后有跟着我们的这个业风来决定我们投身到6道中的哪一道。那因为我们修善行持戒，不管是离孽或者留孽而受生到人身或者是天人的道理，那么佛陀是给予这个
It says we should study, reflect, and meditate. Study literally means to hear, and so what do we need to hear? We need to hear or listen to. We need to listen to the teachings on karma, the infallibility of karma, cause and effect. So you need to hear that there is not just this life, but there are past and future lives, and there is karma, cause and effect. And that actually is the root of all Dharma teachings, is the teachings on karma. Because then once you know that, you will not do anything at least that brings yourself down, that harms yourself. So because you recognize through the teachings on karma, what is it that brings suffering to yourself and also others? And what is it that brings happiness? So through the teachings on karma, you will naturally be unmistaken as to what to do and what not to do. So the studying or the hearing here refers to the teachings of karma and also the twofold truth. And then reflection, then we reflect on that. So you think about it, is it true or is it not true? So you reflect, for instance, the nature of humans and animals who coexist in this world. Actually, even though our illusory bodies are different, our mind still is the same. Our experiences, our feelings are the same, even though due to our karma we experience different experiences of happiness and suffering. But it all comes down to the karma that we have accumulated. And so when you observe that, when you reflect on that, you recognize how important karma is. And then who accumulates karma? It is the mind. So you reflect in this way when you are contemplating karma, for example. Lord Jigten Sumgön had said, cause and effect, or karmic ripening, is the natural manifestation of one's moment-to-moment thoughts. So the frightful and really miserable manifestations of animals, for example, are all a natural manifestation of afflictive emotions. And then gods and humans, for example, are the natural manifestation of love and compassion, temporarily. And ultimately, love and compassion naturally will manifest as enlightenment, the 3 kayas of Buddha. So all of this arises from knowing what to do and what not to do, the difference between virtue and non-virtue. So when you reflect on that, then a certainty arises in you and you think that this is really true. So that is studying or listening and reflecting. And then lastly, meditation. So all of that ultimately comes down to the mind. the root of samsara and nirvana is the mind. And if you purify your mind, you attain actual freedom. Then you have the freedom to create your own happiness and also to create your own suffering. So therefore, to avoid suffering, we purify our mind stream. So as Milarepa had said, if the mind becomes pure, then the 10 virtuous actions will naturally arise, and the 10 non-virtuous actions will naturally settle into their natural place. So when you reflect in this way, and you really think about karma, so how it naturally arises, and as Milarepa had said, for example, then you will naturally, when you know that, you will naturally not kill, for example, because you will understand that is the cause of suffering. You will naturally turn away, and you will naturally turn to a mind of love and compassion. And so regarding meditation, it is also, as it is said in the 37 Bodhisattva practices, in verse number 36, where it says, in brief, whatever you do, you should look at the state of your mind. Always examine your mind. Am I being afflicted? What arises in the mind? Am I being selfish? Is there other thoughts of love and compassion? Always look at your mind. And in this way, on the relative level, when you practice the relative truth, you hold on to the mind of love and compassion. And then on the ultimate level, you realize the twofold truth. And so this is the meditation, or study, reflection, and meditation. So this is how you practice them. This is, you really think about the meaning and then you incorporate it into your mind. So meditation means that after you have really understood and reflected, then through meditation you are purifying your mind. And so that means, for example, through sustaining mindfulness and heedfulness. It means to meditate, to practice shamatha and vipassana, to develop the discriminating wisdom. It basically means to engage in meditation practice. So that is the meaning of enter undistracted, the path of study, reflection, and meditation. And so once you understand the meaning of that, and then you recite this prayer, as you express these words, the meaning of these words that you express have to appear in your mind in this way.
那我们因为行善，比如说持戒来讲，我们持泥念或扭捏的也好，自然会帮助我们受生到人身或天人。那么佛陀给予这些在轮回的众生没有办法经常修法的人，给予这个方便。如果他们能够持8关斋戒，那每一次持守都能够种下将来受生人身的种子。就像我们最近才有的这个扭捏8关斋戒的闭关，也就是这样子的做法。那么我们来看一下这个中阴这个6根本颂。呜呼！此生中阴现前时，寿命无常，常懒惰，屈辱不懈，闻思修，现心转道，显三身。今复此番人生时，绝非悠闲散漫时。那我们这一生呢，我们要了解到的这个，在修中阴的时候呢，我们应该要。或修一切法，我们都有一个阶段，就是透过闻思修。那有关中阴所讲的是闻是什么呢？我们要了解法教因果业力不灭的道理。那么不只是在此生，并且要了解到过去世及未来生对于业的这个作用因果的道理。那我们透过这个业的法教呢，那么就自然知道什么应该做，什么不应该做，也就是在2地上来修，世俗地跟圣义地上面来修。那么思维呢，我们要知道人跟畜生的差别，虽然外相是不同，但是我们的心事都是一样的，都要离苦得乐的。可是因为我们的业的不同，所以我们受报也有不同。 那到底是谁在累积这些业呢？主要是我们的心事。吉田松公主是在过去就有讲说，所谓因果业力的成熟，都是在我们一刹那一刹那间的念头的成熟。那我们知道行恶的话，不管是畜生道、恶鬼道、地狱道，都是由于烦恼而来的这个果。那这个受生到天道跟人道，都是过去世有修慈心跟悲心的结果。那虽然目前是受生为天人，就近而言是有可能可以证悟佛的这个三身法报化三身的。那我们知道这样子的道理，自然知道什么事应当做，什么事不应当做，对于这一点有确定的这个信心。那我们知道说这样子做的话，也要去思维业是如何升起的。当我们真正了知业是如何升起，自然就不会去杀这些其他的众生，因为我们知道杀业是苦果的因，那自然的我们内心会升起这个慈悲心。
Result having listened, reflected, and meditated. So as a result, we need to become free from distraction, and so it says so making perceptions and mind the path and realize the three kayas. So the appearances, or the perceptions here, or appearances, what are the appearances? So now what appears, what we perceive, is from a dualistic perspective. We perceive self and other, a duality of samsara and nirvana. So there are many perceptions, many appearances. But in the 37 Bodhisattva practices on the ultimate truth, it says, the way things appear is your own mind. So when you think about, you reflect on that mind, the mind of all sentient beings in the 6 realms and your own mind, is it the same or is it not the same? So, for example, think about yourself or human beings and animals. So it might seem at first that we are different, we are separate beings. But actually we are not, because the basis of our mind is one and the same. The difference lies in having or not having entered this path, so entered this undistracted this path, or making perceptions in mind the path. So if one has made it the path, and if one understands the mind, then one may take birth as a human being. And if one has not taken things as the path, one has not entered the path, then one is carried away by the karmic winds, the afflictive emotions, and takes birth, for example, as a poisonous snake, as a manifestation of hatred or anger. So when you look at this snake, for example, then if you know that, at this point, you will think that our mind is actually the same. Difference just lies in having or not having entered the path. And because that snake has not entered the path, that's why he's now appearing as a snake. But the basis of our mind is exactly the same, just like energy, light energy. And if you think about that, if you understand that, then you will actually follow your own law of karma. And that is the law of Buddhism. It is the law of karma. In the world, you have outer laws, but we have it all within the mind. And so then it says, so making perceptions in mind the path and realize the 3 kayas. So it is said that everything has the nature of the 3 kayas, and specifically the 6 realms of samsara are all nirmana kayas. And then so you might wonder, like, how can there be nirmana kayas? Because nirmana kaya is what we call a durku, and then we think that a durku, a nirmana kaya, is a great being. So clearly not all sentient beings are durkus or nirmana kayas. Because we think that normally a durku is someone, a nirmana kaya is a manifestation of love and compassion. So on the one hand there is. So there are pure and impure nirmana kayas, and the pure nirmana kaya arises out of love and compassion and then manifests as the Buddhas and the teachers, the Sangha, the three jewels, and so forth. And then you also have the impure Nirmanakayas, and these are all the sentient beings in the 6 realms of samsara. They are the Durgus or Nirmanakayas, meaning the emanations of the 6 afflictive emotions, especially the 3 lower realms. So the mind of a sentient being in the 3 lower realms still possesses Buddha nature, but for as long as they have not purified karma, they will stay in the lower realms. And whenever it becomes purified, karma becomes purified, then there still is Buddha nature. And that's why they have the nature of the 3 kayas. For example, it's just like you're washing a dirty towel. You just have to keep washing it until it's clean, basically. So it's just like that. And once it is completely clean, you have just Buddha nature in the natural state. So for the 3 kayas and the various emanations, they are pure and they are impure. And the Dharmakaya, one of the kayas, is the basis, the ground, which is like space. It is the naturally pure mind. And on that level, all beings of the 6 realms are one and the same. And then the Sambhogakaya appears like a rainbow in the sky and is the natural manifestation of bodhicitta. So when bodhicitta is present, then naturally the Pure Land and the pure Buddha forms appear. So when you understand that, when you read this line here and realize the 3 kayas, then these ideas will come to your mind. Then you will think that if there is bodhicitta, then the Pure Lands will arise. And if the mind is impure, then the impure karmic winds are going to take the mind to take birth in the various realms of samsara. However, nevertheless, everything, all phenomena, ultimately have the nature of the 3 kayas. So that is the point to understand here.
那我们刚刚讲到说，当我们思维业如果真正了知的话，那自然就不会去杀生。那在这个佛子行37颂里面第36记有提到，总之何处行何事，因观自心何相状，恒具正念与正知，成办利他佛子行。我们应该要知道所谓的这个闻思修之后，我们就自然知道我们什么事应该做，什么事不应该做，并把它融入到我们日常生活的行止当中，保持我们的正念来禅修、修止或修观，那张扬我们自己的这个开现我们自己的成所作智。那么透过禅修来做闻思修，我们了解这个道理之后，那么在读这个偈颂的时候，我们自己它的真正的意义自然能够在心识当中升起。那闻思修的结果之后是什么呢？我们能够保持正念而不散乱不分心。这边有讲到趋入不懈闻思修，现心转道现三身。我们所感的呢，这一般众生所感的就是自他或者是轮回涅槃二元对立的状况。在佛子行37颂也有提到，那究竟的一切都是来自于我们自己的内心，我们的感受跟他们的其他人或者其他众生的感受有什么不同呢？虽然在外相上我们是相当的不同，但在心识的本质上我们是等同的，没有差别的。差别在于我们是不是已经进入了修行道与否。如果已经进入道的人呢，他透过他们的善行修行呢，可以受生人身；还没有进入这个修行道的人，是在中阴的阶段，自然会依着业风以及自己的烦恼而受生。比如说，当我们也因为嗔恨心呢，有可能转生成一个毒蛇。当我们看到毒蛇的时候，我们应该立即了知，我们的心性跟它的心性，毒蛇的心性是本质是相同的。那差别在于我们是不是进入的这个道。如果了解到这一点呢，那我们就能够按照自己业的这个法则来做。 那这些也就是佛教基本的这法则。那我们在这个世俗上有外在的法则跟法律。那之前讲的屈入不懈，闻思修，现心转道现三身。一切的众生都有三身的，即使是轮回六道的众生，也都是化身的这个显现。但是对于这一点，有些人可能有所疑惑。我们讲的化身，一般不是讲主骨吗？那为什么说连畜生道都是主骨呢？我们要知道，一般虽然讲主骨是净的化身，是慈悲心的化身，但是化身本身有净与不净的差别。有慈悲心的可能转化成佛、上师、三宝或僧团，那么不净的呢，可能是随着六等烦恼化身的主骨。那即使在他们还是有佛性的，在还没有净化自己的业力之前呢，他还是在成为六道受生的这个众生。
So the paradigm of living, the paradigm of living is the time from when we are born until we die. And in the paradigm of living, what's most important is an undistracted mind. Then second is the paradigm of dreaming. And it says, Gema, now when the paradigm of dreams is dawning upon me, I will abandon the heedless corpse-like sleep of ignorance
呜呼，梦之中阴现前时，不作放逸于躺卧，无散正念性中住，依梦修炼幻光明。莫若傍生酣失眠，应当梦明容何修？
ourselves, is there a difference between the dream state and the waking state, the daytime? And in your dream, while you're dreaming, that is your reality, and you engage in all kinds of activities in the dream. And in the dream, you experience the same feelings of happiness and suffering as you do during the waking state, due to those karmic imprints present in your mind. And so if the mind is trained in sustaining a state of clarity, that becomes a method to recognizing the luminosity of the dream state. So you bring the mindfulness that you have developed in the waking state into the dream state when you're sleeping. And that means that you recognize, oh, this is a dream. You recognize you're in a dream. And when you recognize that, then all kinds of fear will naturally disappear. And then also you will recognize these fearful appearances of the bardo, and they will also collapse at that point when you recognize that this is the bardo. And so now, for as long as you have the karma of this material body in this life, you cling to the true existence of this lifetime, you will continue to experience whatever karma needs to be experienced. But then that karma comes to an end, and then the perception, the appearance changes. And so then therefore we also need to recognize that the bardo and the dreams are one and the same. So first, to recognize the dream state, first you recognize, when you practice the dream yoga, first you recognize the dream state, and then gradually it is referred to as you recognize the subtle luminosity of the dream state, and then the deep luminosity of the dream state, referring to the luminosity of the deep sleep state, actually. And so then once you progress in this way, you can, as it says here, when you recognize dreams, I will train and transform in transformation and clear light. So it begins with recognizing the dream state. When you recognize the dream state, you know that I am in a dream. And then if you habituate to that, and you always recognize the dream state, then you can begin to transform yourself in the dream state. For example, you can transform yourself into a bird and fly anywhere, or you can travel to a pure land, and so on. And so these abilities come from the meditation you have trained in the waking state. So it is the mind that is habituated to shamatha and vipassana and so on. The mind that has become very clear. And when the mind is very clear, then the mind knows that it is all pervasive. It pervades the entire universe and all sentient beings. So this is what you see then when the mind becomes very clear. And so then you might think that, oh, at some point some clairvoyant ability arises. But it's not quite like that. Nothing really actually changes in the mind, but it is just that it becomes cleared. For example, when an ocean that is a bit muddy, when the mud settles and it becomes clear, then you can see what's at the bottom of the ocean, what has already been there, but what you couldn't see before, all the little animals on the bottom of the ocean. So this happens when you have trained the mind in shamatha and vipassana. And the mind becomes very clear. And with a clear mind, you are able to recognize the confused perceptions around you, as whatever appears. And so recognizing that and having a clear mind then in the dream state, you may be able then to transform and travel to pure lands and so forth, or wherever the mind wishes to go, because you have recognized that the mind already is all pervasive, pervades the entire universe and all sentient beings. And so then it says, I must not simply slumber like an animal, but combine sleep with realization. This is crucial. Normally, we think that sleeping actually is a good thing, and we say that if I don't get enough sleep, it's not good, because then I can't do my job tomorrow, I can't work tomorrow. But actually, deep sleep, is also a karma of ignorance. We are actually accumulating the cause of birth as an animal in the deep sleep state. And therefore, we can see that even the slightest mindfulness is really very significant. So it says that ideally, in the highest way, the luminosity appears in the dream state. Or in a kind of medium case, the dream state, dreaming stops, or in the least case, virtue arises in the dream. So ideally, you recognize the dream state, which is called you recognize the luminosity of the dream state. And if not, in the middling or medium case, the dreaming stops, is interrupted. You can stop the dreaming. And in the end, at least, finally, you are able to, at the very least, you're able to remember virtue in the dream. You have virtuous dreams. For example, if you practice virtue during the daytime, then you will also remember virtue during the dream state. For example, if you're spinning a prayer wheel during the daytime, then you might also dream of spinning a prayer wheel. Or you might cultivate love and compassion for the beings in your dream. So virtue will arise in your dream state. And so this is actually the start of practicing dream yoga. So when you read this line, reflect in this way.
那么好像这种我们在慢慢在净除我们业力的过程，就好像我们洗一个肮脏的这个毛巾一样，我们一直要继续洗，一直洗，一直到它干净为止，得到正德三身。那我们讲到说，化身是分成净跟不净的两种，法身呢是以我一切的基础基地，就好像虚空一样。那么这个报身呢，那就是这个苦的这个划线。如果我说如果说我们有这种种种的烦恼，自然会 如果我们了解到这个道理，那我们这一个句话就可以提醒我们能够升起菩提心，报身就是菩提心的化身。
Dream state, the dream yoga. But one method that really anybody can practice is that before you go to sleep, as you fall asleep within a state of non-distraction, an undistracted state. And then the very moment you wake up from sleeping, immediately be mindful, be heedful. If you're able to wake up in a state of mindfulness, then that is probably sufficient, at least for those people who are not that diligent in practice. And then they can attain, it is said, enlightenment in the Sambhogakaya, in the Bardo, arising as the Yidam deity. And so also what you can do for that is you fall asleep, remembering whatever Yidam deity you practice, your Yidam deity. So you bring to mind the Yidam deity and recite a few mantras, or you can also listen to a recording of the mantra as you fall asleep. And then the moment you wake up from sleeping, you can remember the Yidam or the seed syllable of that Yidam, like the Hung or the Shri and so forth. So this is something that anybody can practice. And if you practice in this way, then probably later you can attain enlightenment as a Sambhogakaya and the Bardo, and this is actually, it really becomes a practice of the dream yoga, the dream Bardo. So this is the easiest instruction on the dream yoga practice, a dream Bardo practice.
那么我们要知道说，报身刚刚讲到报身是菩提心的化现，有菩提心就能够化现成善的这个净的这个报身。如果我们了解这个意思的话，可以提醒我们要时时升起我们的菩提心，不管是对于净跟不净的。对于不净的这种意念呢，因自然会受生到六道。那么我们要了解一切现象本质上都有法报化三身。那么此生的中阴呢，从生至死呢，那在这个阶段我们要不分心，不散乱，在睡梦中当中我们要这样了解到醒梦一如的道理。
We think that daytime, the waking state is real, and the dreams are not real. So actually, that is not the case. It is just now we have a physical body, and so for as long as the karma is present of this body, we will stay in this kind of existence. And then once we go on, the lifetime, the appearances of this lifetime will actually become like a dream. There's really not the slightest difference. So when you reflect on that, when you recognize that, you can really see there is no difference between the waking state and the dream state. And it all depends on the karma that we have created. For however long we have that karma, this specific appearance or kind of existence will remain for that time. And we can see in this world, it happens in many different ways. It appears in so many different ways, karma manifests. But it's all the same in terms of being like a dream. So when you recognize that, you will see everything, this world and everything that is happening in this life, it's all just a dream. And the mind on the basis remains the same. So in brief, what you need to understand here is that there is no difference between the waking state and the dream state. And actually, the dream is just as real as the waking state. And later, when you leave this life and go on into the bardo is just like a dream too. Then that will become an actual experience. And so when you recognize that, the dream-like nature of the waking state and of this life, then the fixation to the true existence of the appearances in this life, in the waking state, will get lesser. So that is the benefit of this understanding.
理解到了上帝把它确定的，上帝把它是把它当时就上高头建的，让这让一个让人修。
那么我们知道睡觉的时候，如果我们执梦为实的话，那么在这个事实上就好像在我们醒的时候，把一切的苦跟乐在我们心中的这个经验一样。如果说我们有心在这训练，在这个清明的这个境界的话，那么了知在睡梦之中自然能够了知我们是在睡梦之中的这个道理。那我们把清醒事实的这个修行带到这个梦中，那么一切的恐惧都会消失，一切中阴中的恐惧如果能够了知这个就是中阴的阶段，那么他们自然而然就会消失了。如果说我们知道说此生为幻的话，那么我们也了解业的过程，那么我们要有这个觉知，也会有自然而然会可以有一个改变。我们应该知道说，这个中阴的阶段跟梦中的阶段是很像，是一致的。有人讲到说修梦瑜伽，那我们要了知说，首先要了知醒梦一如的道理，然后再训练我们在梦中的明觉，再接下来在深眠中的明觉，然后证悟到的幻光明。所以我们第一步就是要了解说，我们现在在做梦，我们在梦中，那一切的串习是这个醒的这时间的串习，转化成梦中的一些景象。那在梦中，如果有这种明觉的了知呢，这能够转化我们自己的梦，然后比如说转化为鸟，可以飞到不同的地方去，甚至飞到净土去。那我们在醒的时候的禅修也是很重要的，我们要修止观，这个是我们的基础。让我们内心很清明的时候，我们知道一切为幻，那么一切众生，或许在这个阶段，有些人讲说，那我们是不是就会具有神通的，并不是这样子的道理。我们的心是不变的，只是我们的心变得更清明的，就好像我们的土的水呢是很浑浊的，可是我们当这个水很浑浊的时候，我们自然见不到水底的生物。呜呼！禅定中阴现前时，断除懒散迷乱众，无散无执离边住，当获稳固二生缘，弃离所事专修时，勿受烦恼迷乱牵。
Reach the third yoga of one taste. This entire period is referred to as the bardo of samadhi or meditation. And so then once you have realized this stage of one taste, equal taste, then the mind becomes unchanging and stable. And it is said then that within that state of one taste, the self-knowing primordial awareness arises on its own. So you will gain certainty through the experience of one taste. So some people say that that happens actually when you reach the fourth stage of non-meditation, but that is a little bit difficult, and it probably already arises at the stage of one taste. So in any case, so at this point, you abandon all forms of distraction and rest in the infinite state that is free of distraction and grasping. So this distraction and delusion, when the mind stays in a state of practice, it shouldn't become controlled by delusion. So sometimes we do stay in a state of practice, we are practicing, but at the same time the mind is still controlled by various confusions or delusions. And Now, what is a delusion or confusion? It is when a thought appears in the mind and a feeling appears in the mind, and you cling to it and you hold that to be as true. So you think that about anything, you think that this is how it is or this is not how it is. So it is a grasping it is a holding of something to be true. And then due to that, we develop thoughts of more coarse thoughts of attachment and anger and so on. And their subtle counterparts are hope and fear. So all these various feelings arise, and these feelings are what we call delusions or confusions. If the mind is in a state of mindfulness, an undistracted mind, then no matter how many of these thoughts appear, they will not harm you or affect you in any way. They will just come like a wave on water and then again subside. That is if the mind is undistracted and doesn't grasp at them. So it is important to understand the difference between being deluded and not being deluded or confused. So when you are confused or deluded, then for example, you get angry at somebody, and then this resentment, this negative feeling about that person that you're angry at, stays in your mind, and you think that this is just how it is. So that is when you're unmindful. So if you're mindful, then the anger arises together with the mindfulness, and therefore the feeling of anger, the affliction, does not become like ordinary and unrestrained. If you're unmindful and the anger arises, then it becomes a real unrestrained anger, an ordinary afflictive emotion. So this is really what you need to look at. Is the anger or the emotion that arises in me, is it ordinary and unrestrained or not? Does it arise within mindfulness? So if an emotion arises, but it's not ordinary and unrestrained, then also you will not become confused. And that kind of emotion can easily become purified. It easily dissolves again. So it's important that you see here what is the difference between delusion and an undeluded state.
영미 답답한 거죠. 마인발 생사람이 시지마.
那么我们在训练我们的心是透过直观来修我们的心的话，我们心就比较清明，那我们就可以看到这个自己很迷惘的这种种的这种幻象，见到并能够转化，可以到不同的地方，比如说到净土一般。那我们一般人会认为说，睡眠是很重要，是很好，我们要有足够的睡眠。但是我们应该了解到，我们深度的睡眠事实上是一种无明的。那如果说我们只在那里的话，就是将来也是受生这个畜生道的这个原因。所以即使在睡眠的时候，我们都要尽量保持我们清明的觉知。我们知道我们现在是在做梦。那么对善境界的人呢，知道说这个是梦境，然后我们自然就不会受它影响。那中等程度的人，我们知道说我们现在是在做梦，就停止梦境。下等境界的人呢，起码因为在日间的行善呢，在梦中呢还能够意念起善行，在梦中还能够行善。比如说我们在白天有这个摇转经轮啊，那么对众生升起慈悲心啊，所以在这个又在梦中也要意念起这种善行。那这些就是我们在修行睡梦瑜伽的一个第一步。睡梦瑜伽一般我们在入睡之前呢，我们要保持这个正念，一醒来的时候也要保持正念，当然在睡梦之中也要保持正念。那么对于这些不是那么精进修行的人，如果能够起码在入眠之前跟一觉醒来就马上意念起正念跟本尊，这个也是很好的修行方法。
Free of distraction and grasping. And the state that is the mind needs to be clear. The undistracted state is a state of clarity. when the mind is undistracted and the mind is vividly clear and knowing, aware of what happens. So that is the clarity aspect. We become unmindful when a thought arises and we follow that thought. We pursue the thought because we think that it's true. This is how something is. Then we become unmindful. If a thought arises, even a very strong thought arises, and you are mindful, it is said that the thought, the affliction must arise. This infinite state, so literally this state without extremes or limitations or any boundaries. That is, when one has realized the view of Mahamudra, one realizes that the mind, just like space, is without center and without boundary. It is all pervasive, but you don't actually have to think about that. You don't have to think the mind is all pervasive, or is it all pervasive or not. This pervasiveness actually arises naturally. So this experience of pervasiveness is nothing that you actually fabricate, but it arises naturally as a result of having realized the view, the nature of the mind. And it arises from this state that is free of distraction and grasping. It means basically all that need to be done is just to stay within this state that is free from distraction and free from grasping. So that's really the essence of what is pointing out the nature of the mind instructions that many people request. Also, Milarepa had said, when you stay in a state of clarity that is without any grasping, then the state of one-pointedness will spontaneously arise, naturally arise. So that is the crucial point, is that it arises spontaneously or naturally. So it is enough to just stay in an undistracted state without any grasping. And so then you don't actually have to think in terms of everything is pervasive and so forth. Like the mind, is it all pervasive? Now I meditate on the mind like space. You don't have to actually even reflect on that. It just happens naturally as a result of being undistracted and without grasping. So basically, you don't even have to recognize or think about how this world doesn't really exist inherently. Basically, but now once you understand, once you have realized this all pervasiveness of mind, then just naturally you know that things lack inherent existence. So when you do not grasp at anything to be real, possessing any real existence whatsoever, when you don't hold this universe and all beings to truly exist, then just naturally, you recognize the all-pervasive nature of the mind. It's nothing that actually you have to accomplish or do something to it. So that is the basis that need to be understood. And when you understand the basis, then the path, the experience will then actually arise naturally.
那么这个在禅定中阴呢，我们要修的就是这个我们的心的 这个不变。如果我们在一味安住在一味的境界之中呢，我们自然明白的本初智自明的这种本初智就自然会升起，那能够有一味的这种体验。那这个跟这个大手印第4阶段的一味禅定是对一般人来讲是要修到这个程度是比较困难的。可是在这个中阴的这个阶段，我们如果能够保持不迷惘不散乱，保持正念呢，那么这个是重要的。在我们禅修的过程当中呢，我们一般人心思当中还是会有一些妄想念头幻想的出现。当我们幻想念头出现的时候，一般人就会执着执其为实。那么这个就是产生的种种的这个烦恼。粗的烦恼呢，我们会执着或者是排拒它；那细的烦恼呢，我们会有希求跟恐惧之心。但是我们如果说有正念的话，它这些念头就不会来打扰我们，也不会影响我们。这差别在我们是不是保持正念，或者是迷惘有关。对别人生气的时候，事实上我们如果说随我们的烦恼而走的话，我们心里面的情绪会有的时候变成无法控制，那这是因为没有正念的关系。如果我们能够保持正念，即使是嗔心升起的时候，我们有正念，那么我们的反应就不会变成很平常的，就是说一切都不受拘服的这个烦恼。所以差别在我们是否有正念。如果我们在烦恼升起的时候也可以有正念的时候，我们就比较不容易迷惘，这些烦恼呢，这些嗔恨之心呢，也比较容易状态也比较容易消融。这就是迷悟之间的差别。那么我们所谓的正念不分心的清明状态呢，我们在这个状态之中，心里是清清朗朗了知一切的发生，这个是我们本性当中明性的一部分。如果说我们去失去了正念，而追随我们自己的念头的话，自然我们就失去了正念。所以当一个强烈的心念升起的时候呢，我们保持正念，应该知道这些就是烦恼，我们不应该随着这些烦恼而去。在没有这个状态之中，是没有中间也没有极端的。当我们了知大手印的一切如空的这种状态当中，我们自然知道说，这个虚空当中是没有所谓的中间，也没有所谓的四边的，它心性是自然是遍一切处的。那我们甚至倒不必去想我们的心是不是遍一切处，因为它自然而然就是当我们了知的时候，我们心性自然而然就是遍一切处，自然而然的了知的。所以我们要做的事是不是保持正念，不散乱，不分心。弥勒日巴祖师过去讲说，当我们能够安住在清明之境的时候，我们能够不分心，那么我们的心的自然情况自然能够升起。
Generation and perfection. Generation and perfection. So it refers to the generation and completion stages. And regarding the way in which we train in generation and completion, so there's all kinds of different individuals that train in different ways depending on their dispositions. For example, some people are more drawn to the elaborate practices, and some are more drawn to the unelaborated practices. But in general, generation and completion must be unified. So first of all, we have to gain stability in the generation stage. And so for that, we need to understand what is the generation stage, and you need to really gain a trust or confidence in the generation stage. And so how can we develop this? So there are two ways of approaching or practicing the generation stage. So one is from the perspective of the fundamental basis. So we need to understand the ground, the basis. And the second one is from the perspective of experience and practice. So actually the basic understanding of the generation stage is actually extremely important. With regard to that, the Drigung Master Dhammaraja had said, when you understand that, when you realize that all that appears and exists is the form of the deity, then you have perfected the generation stage of the secret mantra. This is extremely important. So the entire universe, everything that appears and exists, or the universe and all sentient beings, there are many appearances, pure and impure. There are the 6 realms of samsara and so forth, arising out of the 6 afflictions. But what is the basis, the ground of all of that? We need to understand that it is the form of the deity. Everything has the fundamental nature of the deity. Also, Chigden Sumgön had said, I'm a yogin who has realized that my parents, the yidams and the 6 realms are all one. It's all one. So what do we need to understand here? The outer universe, no matter how limitless it may be, it all is comprised of the 5 elements. And the inner sentient beings, however many there are, within their minds, they all possess the 5 afflictive emotions. And therefore, the body and the mind of a single person represents the entire outer universe and all sentient beings. The universe and all beings are actually contained within the body and the mind of a single person. So when you reflect in this way, you realize it's all the same. And it is just a difference in maturing and not maturing. When we mature the mind, then the afflictive emotions, when they mature, they become wisdom. So that's the only difference. So on the outer level, when the afflictions have matured, the 5 elements are actually the 5 dakinis, or the 5 mothers by nature. And the inner 5 afflictions are the 5 male Buddhas. And so in this way, through understanding this, momentarily the mind can mature. So there is actually then, once the mind matures in this way, it sees that there's actually nothing at all throughout the 6 realms that is impure. Everything is actually pure. So everything that appears and exists is seen as the form of the deity. That is the perfection of the generation stage of the secret mantra of the Vajrayana. So that is really the what we need to get at, understand, in terms of the generation stage practice of the deity. So it is especially to be applied when all kinds of things appear in the mind, all kinds of pure and impure thoughts and so on arising in the mind. There's all kinds of thoughts constantly arising in the mind. And for as long as these many thoughts arise, we have not yet perfected the generation stage. So it's very helpful for that to understand this fundamental nature, the basis. And then with that understanding, you can quickly separate yourself from any doubts regarding that. If you don't really understand this fundamental basis, even though you might practice the deity, it still will be quite difficult to actually develop a pure perception. So we still continue to see things in a pure and in an impure way. So in brief, whenever we see things in an impure, negative way, it is because of the affliction of aversion in our mind. So that is what needs to be purified, and the reason why we practice the generation stage is in order to purify these impure perceptions. So that is why we practice generation stage. And when you habituate to that and you understand the fundamental basis, then a certainty arises in your mind, a conviction arises. And then with this conviction, you will also naturally see the ultimate truth through the pure perception developed through the generation stage. And the ultimate truth, which is the completion stage, that is explained in the Mahamudra teachings, where it says, without a single thought decisively look at the ultimate nature. So the perfection or the completion stage is the view of Mahamudra, the realization of Mahamudra. When the mind rests in the natural state within the view, in the completion, don't think about anything whatsoever in terms of existence or non-existence. And then that becomes naturally the completion stage, which is the view of Mahamudra. So together in union, the creation of generation and completion represents the unified state of Mahamudra, which is the union of clarity and emptiness. The clarity aspect is the generation stage, and the emptiness aspect is the completion stage. And their union is the natural state of the mind, which is this unity of clarity and emptiness. That is your innate nature, and it is actualized when you habituate to the generation and completion stages. And you attain stability in it when you are free of doubts, which is why it is important to have this understanding of the fundamental basis in order to be free of doubts. So that's extremely important, because once you have doubts in your mind, even if you practice, that will lead to an endless chain of many different thoughts. And the doubts in your mind obscure the nature of the mind. So until you have completely freed yourself of all doubts, you must train in a pure perception again and again.
사와방에 제게 공부도 좀 trouble 마당시에서 이 사와방 시반에더니 이제리랑 게 그래도 진보 끝낸 상황들이 누구 살도지 저한테 말이 누가 라도 잡았지 소리 근데 저바도라도 사와 라도 저 먼저 사와들 어떻게 맞아 대 가래 되라는 게
那如果说我们能够安住在一个清明的境地当中呢，不分心不散乱的话，这个是很重要的。我们不必特别去思维这个我们心性是不是骗一切，只要是不去执着，而且不散乱的话，自然我们了知心性本质就是骗一切处的。那也自然知道说一切是现象，是没有自性的。
Next line it says, at this time of single-pointed meditation, having given up activity and so forth, I must not fall under this way of affliction and delusion. So the abandoning, having given up all activity. So what that means is that we give up hopes and fears with regard to our activities, not the actual activities per se, but for example, there is here one shouldn't have this intense ambition and must accomplish this certain activity. One just naturally engages in one's conduct through like single-pointedness and non-distraction, and one engages in the activities, but there is no like strong hopes and ambitions that I must accomplish something, or if something is not easily accomplished, one does not insist on kind of force something to be accomplished. Basically, one is content with whatever comes along, but there is no thought of I must by all means, I have to do this, I have to accomplish this. The only thing that really has to be accomplished then is the state of enlightenment for the sake of sentient beings. But aside from that, one does not fall under the power of hopes and fears and attachment and aversion. So Dhamma friends, please take a break for 20 minutes.
那仁波切等一下会要休息20分钟，但是我们还是有口传，还是有中文要补的部分。那请大家稍后安心先不要离开。
So for those of you following on
如果说我们了知的一切都是没有自信，我们知道的心是自然是遍布一切的，不必特别再去做一些思维。那这个也跟我们平常在做修本尊法的 这个升起次第、圆满次第的训练是有关的。那我们这个一个人的能力跟业力有不同的喜好，有些人喜欢修非常繁复的法，有些人喜欢修不是那么繁复的法。在我们升起次第的修行的时候，我们要先稳定我们的成就，先升起信心。那这个信心如何长养呢？我们第一个就是根本上要了知说这一切的基本在哪里，然后第二部分是从修行或经验上来讲，在直供噶举的上祖师达玛拉扎他有讲说，当我们了解到一切显现就是本尊的视线的时候，我们已经圆满了密咒乘的修行了。这是一个非常重要的法教，而是也不容易达到的一个境界。我们知道说一切的显象，那么净与不净呢，六烦恼的种种的这种显现，那一切都是本尊的化现。弥勒日巴祖师讲都说，我是一个瑜伽行者，父母本尊六道众生都是合而为一的。那在这个指的是什么？就是外在的现象呢，有无量无边，这些，但是这一些都是由五大元素，地水火风空五大元素而组成的。内在的有情众生也具有同样的五烦恼，所以一切众生一切现象都是等同的，都是一个众生当中就具足的法界一切外内的五烦恼或者是五大的。那么先差别是在我们心识中是不是成熟，当我们不成熟的时候，那么就是有烦恼，那当我们成熟的时候，就能够把烦恼转化成菩提智慧。外在的五大是五空行五佛母，内在的五烦恼是五勇士，那转成了五智慧。这差别在净跟不净的差别。事实上在就近的净地上是没有净跟不净的差别，一切都是净的。当我们心中升起一切净跟不净这些念头升起的时候，我们就知道我们自己还没有真正成熟升起次第的修行。当我们了知的这一切呢，就自然能远离一切的疑惑，否则呢，我们在还必须在升起次第上面好好的观修，然后有一些训练我们自己的静观。当我们显现知道说一切的不净就是来自于我心，那加以净化我们的升起次第呢，那净化一切不净的这种观，那么我们加以串习，我们了知它究竟的意义是什么，一切究竟是一切清净的，然后有所信心，那升起信心，然后我们就能够真正的了解它的究竟的真谛，这个时候就是圆满次第的成就了。所以在这个时候说，我们讲说这个没有任何的念头，那么这个了知的这个一切事物的这个真谛，当我们的心能够安住在我们见地上的时候，就不必再去做其他的思维了，自然是有这个大圆满这个境界，这个圆满次第的境界了。不管我们讲升起次第或圆满次第，它跟我们大手印所讲的明空不二的道理是一样的，是融合的，它在我们心的本性状态之中是一种本然自有的这个状态。那我们心性当中的明性就是像我们升起次第要修的，空性就是我们圆满次第要修的。当我们修行能够稳固的时候，我们自然而然有一种了知确信，有信心，不再有任何的疑惑。那如果说我们有疑惑的话，就会升起许多妄想，就容易追逐这些妄想。如果说我们没有去掉这些疑惑，没有这些妄想的话，我们要反复不停的这个训练，那舍弃对一切行止的一切希求跟恐惧，并不是说不要去有任何的想法，而是说我们对于外在的一些结果不要有那么样强的执着，不要说有这个野心，我一定要完成什么什么什么的目标，而是自然安住在这个正念不散乱的状态之中，自然而然做自己应该要做的事，而不去坚持，不去执着结果要怎么样，不管什么样的结果，你做你的部分，而能够接受一切所发生的事情。那么要坚持 所做的2件事，就是要我们自己修行，是要为的达到正悟，能够帮助一切众生，对众生的慈悲心，要这2件事情不要忘记，这样就可以了。好像有些法友在问说，这个古列佛母的咒语，昨天仁波切有讲过几次，我也有重复了几次。他的咒语就是 Om Guli Guli Shri So Ha， Shri 就是他的种子字 Shri 字 Om Guli Guli Shri So Ha， 所以这个咒语其实就是很直白的，就是 Om Guli Guli 就是 Guli Guli 咒名佛母的名称， Shri 就是它的种子字 So Ha， 所以跟一般的咒语也是一样，从 Om 开始 Om 开始，从 So Ha 做结尾 Om Guli Guli Shri So Ha。